Picture this. You wake up, and instead of the comfort of your warm bed and the soothing sound of your alarm, you're thrust into the unforgiving world of feudal Japan. It's not like you get to choose your day. Oh no. In this place, your role in society isn't something you figure out as you go. It's decided the moment you're born. Your path? Already mapped out by ancestors you've never met. Whether you're a samurai, peasant, artisan, or merchant, that's it. No options. No escape. No second chances. You're locked in. You might be thinking, samurai sounds awesome. But before you start daydreaming about sword fights under cherry blossoms, hold up. It's not what you think. You don't get to just swing your sword and yell about honor. No. You're living in constant fear. Fear of disrespecting your lord, your ancestors, even your tailor. And heaven help you if you sneeze at the wrong time during a tea ceremony. Yup, dishonor. Immediate disaster. And that can mean losing your head, literally, or worse, having to make the ultimate apology to yourself. Now let's switch gears. You're not a samurai. Not even close. You're a peasant. Welcome to the dirt, sweat, and backbreaking labor. Picture this, your home? A thatched hut with no windows. It's not cozy. It's not romantic. It's a breeding ground for ankle rot. And your meal? A bowl of rice, maybe some turnips, if the gods are feeling generous. And guess what? The rice? You're not eating it for fun. You're eating it because if you don't get enough, you're starving. Taxes are relentless. You're not paid in gold. Nope. You pay in rice. And if that rice doesn't meet the demand, oh, don't worry. Someone's getting punished. Could be you. Could be your family. Could be the whole village. Heads roll, and it's not pretty. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, right? Sure, there's rice, sweat, and endless work. But there's also a sense of duty. But not in the way you might think. You're working the land day in and day out, not because you want to, but because you have to. Your entire life is based on this one fact. There's no escaping it. You are the foundation of the society. The reason the samurai get to eat. The reason the lords stay warm. And what do you get in return? Nothing much, honestly. Maybe a festival here and there. A little sake to wash down the misery. But in the end, your life is just one long stretch of planting, working, and hoping the weather doesn't screw you over. No pressure. But hey, let's talk about your physical state. Your day starts before the sun even thinks about coming up. Why? Well, because you have to. If you don't get up early, guess what? You're not going to meet the rice quota, and that's a problem. You don't get days off. You don't get vacations. No time to rest. Your back is bent from hours in the fields, your hands callous from the constant labor, and you're lucky if you get to sleep without worrying about the next day's work. And the best part? If you're lucky, just maybe you'll get a little rice porridge for breakfast. If you're unlucky, you're pretending to be full with a splash of river water. And then it's off to the fields. Trust me, it's nothing like those peaceful documentaries you've seen. The rice fields? They're mud pits. And they're designed to break you, slowly but surely, until your soul can't take it anymore. And just when you think things can't get worse, you're taxed again. You pay with rice. But the only thing you get in return is the promise of more suffering. If you hide any rice, you're committing treason. That's the law, and it's not forgiving. So, what's the silver lining, you ask? Maybe you're thinking you could just rise above, become a merchant, get rich, live the good life. Nope. Sorry, that's not happening. If you're born a merchant, guess what? You're still at the bottom of the totem pole. Sure, you've got some coin in your pocket, but that's about it. You're looked down on. Why? Because you make money without working for it. Yes, you read that right. If you're a merchant, you're lazy. Because you don't sweat out in the fields. You just buy and sell things. You're too efficient. And let's be real, no one in feudal Japan likes efficiency unless it involves more rice for the samurai. You think that's bad? Let's talk about the samurai's morning routine. Remember how you thought being a warrior was all about looking cool and swinging a sword? Think again. It's about discipline. Endless discipline. No laughter. No showing emotion. No fear. No weakness. You want to smile? Forget it. You'll be labeled unrefined in an instant. And guess what? If you fail at being perfectly composed, you lose your honor. And if you lose your honor, well, we're back to that seppuku thing. That's right. If you screw up badly enough, the best option is to just end yourself. Yep, a nice little ritual suicide to atone for your failure. No biggie, right? But we haven't even scratched the surface yet. You think a samurai's life is all about discipline and honor? Sure, but it's also about surviving day to day without blinking at the wrong time. You mess up once, that's it. Game over. There's no coming back. It's not just about following rules. It's about making sure you don't do anything that could accidentally insult someone more important than you. That means no sneezing the wrong way, no speaking out of turn, no looking at the wrong person at the wrong time. And if you make a mistake, you could end up dead. Here's the second section of the script. But it's not just the samurai who have it tough in feudal Japan. Oh no. If you think they have it hard, imagine being born into the peasant class. Your life? Well, let's just say it's a relentless cycle of hard work, suffering, and more hard work. You think you're going to have a day where you can kick back and relax? Think again. Every single day is about survival. You wake up early, not because you want to, but because you have to. You can't afford to sleep in. The rice fields aren't going to plow themselves, and the taxes are always waiting for you. Imagine this. Your home is a thatched hut with no doors, no windows. And guess what? The goat just walked across your bed. Yep, that's your life. It's not romantic or peaceful. It's dirty, uncomfortable, and exhausting. But hey, at least you get a nice little bowl of rice to start your day. If you're lucky, maybe some turnips, maybe not. If you're really lucky, you get some pickled vegetables to go with it. Breakfast? A luxury. Then, after breakfast, it's off to the fields. And we're not talking about nice, neat rows of crops you see in movies. Oh no, these rice fields? They're mud pits, designed specifically to break you. You're ankle deep in mud, planting rice, hoping that today isn't the day you get raided by bandits. You can't complain. You're too busy surviving. If the weather doesn't kill you, the taxes will. And don't get me started on the taxes. They're brutal. You don't get paid in money. You get paid in rice. The same rice that you've been working your ass off to plant. But the catch? You can never keep enough of it. If you don't meet the rice quota, you're in trouble. Maybe it's starvation. Maybe it's punishment. Maybe it's your village headman looking for someone to blame for the shortfall. And trust me, you don't want to be the one they point to. Talking back? A death sentence. Want to leave your village? Sorry, that's not happening. You're stuck. You're tied to the land, whether you like it or not. Welcome to feudal Japan. No freedom, no escape. And while you're out there, slaving away in the fields, what's your reward? If you're lucky, maybe you get a festival here and there. Maybe some sake. But the reality? Your life is spent tilling the soil, planting rice, working the land. No vacations, no weekends off. Just endless labor. And it gets worse. The weather? It's not your friend. If you're lucky, you don't get hit with a typhoon or a flood. If you're unlucky, you watch your crops drown, your fields wash away, and your hopes go down the drain with them. And while all this is going on, you know what the samurai are doing. They're living their own miserable lives. But at least they've got honor, right? They've got swords, silk robes, and a code to follow. You've got rice fields, ankle-deep mud, and the constant fear of making your lord angry. That's the real kicker. You might be working your butt off to feed the samurai, but you'll never be as important as them. You won't get respect. You're just a cog in a machine doing all the dirty work while they get all the glory. And if you try to complain, well, you already know what happens. The sword doesn't ask questions. So what's the solution? You think you can escape this? Think again. Even if you're born a merchant, sure, you might have a little more coin in your pocket, but that doesn't make you free. You're still not at the top of the social ladder. If you're a merchant, you've got wealth but no respect. And that's a huge problem in a society that values respect above all else. If you don't earn respect through labor or discipline, then what do you really have? A little more money? That's not going to save you. And Don't even think about trying to climb the social ladder. That's not happening. In feudal Japan, you don't get to pick your path. You're born into a role, and that's it. If you're born a peasant, you stay a peasant. You don't get to rise up. You don't get to change your fate. The system is designed to keep you in place. Want to start your own business? That's cute. The law doesn't allow for that. If you're born into this world, you're stuck. The best you can do is try to survive. And the worst? Well, we don't need to talk about that. We already know what happens to people who step out of line. So, yeah, life as a peasant in feudal Japan isn't a picnic. But here's the twist. It's not just peasants who have it rough. You know who else is stuck? Women. And I'm not talking about women who get to do what they want. No. In feudal Japan, women had almost no control over their lives. Whether you were born into a samurai family or a peasant family, you weren't the one making the decisions. Your life was already set for you. You'd marry who you were told. You'd live the life that was given to you. You had no say. It didn't matter if you had dreams of your own. What mattered was your duty to the family, to your lord, and to your ancestors. Your life wasn't yours. It was part of the grand plan. And if you tried to change it, well, that's when things got really ugly. Let's not sugarcoat it. Feudal Japan was a well-oiled machine, but it wasn't built for comfort. The system, designed to keep everyone in their place, working tirelessly and constantly under pressure. Take the samurai, for instance. Sounds cool, right? You got the fancy sword, the beautiful armor, and all that drama. But here's the thing no one tells you. Being a samurai isn't about the glory. It's about surviving. You don't wake up and think, oh, hey, today I'm going to swing my sword around and be a hero. No, you wake up with a pit in your stomach because you're constantly walking on a tightrope. Let's break it down. First off, you got this thing called Bushido. It's the samurai code, and it's intense. Honor, discipline, loyalty. If you screw up even once, you could end up dead. Imagine living every second of your life with that kind of pressure. If you make the smallest mistake, you're dishonoring not just yourself, but your entire family. And let's be clear, dishonor in feudal Japan doesn't just mean, oops, I messed up. It means you're done. You might as well start writing your apology letter, because it's about to be the last thing you ever do. And forget about a simple sorry. Nope. A samurai's apology means ending your own life in a ritual that's, quite frankly, the definition of grim. That's right. If you mess up, you commit seppuku, ritual suicide, as a way to restore your honor. You're basically told, fix it or fix it permanently. But hey, that's not all. Even if you don't mess up, you're constantly under the watchful eye of your lord. Disrespect your lord, even by accident, and you're walking into a world of pain. Imagine living in constant fear of looking at someone the wrong way or having a bad day and letting your emotions slip for a second. You can't afford to show weakness. Ever. This isn't about being a tough guy. This is about living every minute in fear of doing something tiny that could be perceived as wrong. Not strong enough? Disrespect your ancestors? Forget it. You're finished. The pressure is unrelenting. Now, take a step back. You're probably thinking, I'd never make such a mistake. But here's the kicker. Samurai had to live by ridiculous standards. Not just in combat, but in their daily life. You want to eat? You wait your turn. You want to speak? You make sure every word is measured. And you better not show fear, even if you're terrified of being around your lord's wrath. Get something wrong, and you lose everything. Your sword? Gone. Your family's honor? Shattered. The whole samurai way of life is a tightrope walk, one wrong move, and your history. Oh, and let's not forget, you're training all the time. Sword fighting, archery, horseback riding, calligraphy. Everything has to be perfect. You don't get to slack off. If you're a samurai, you're on 24/7, and you can't afford to drop the ball. But wait, let's talk about your daily grind. Samurai don't just sit around looking cool with their swords all day. Nope. They're constantly at work. There's no lounging. There's no Netflix and chill. Every day, you're in battle training, practicing the art of war, and doing it all in perfect form. Your posture? Perfect. You must look like you're always in battle mode, even when you're just sitting down for tea. One wrong move, One wrong gesture, and you're out. If you thought that was tough, let's talk about your emotions. Forget about it. Don't even think about having a little laugh or cracking a joke. You can't afford to look like you're enjoying life. You're supposed to be calm, composed, and, quite frankly, emotionless. People can't see your humanity. That's weakness. You laugh too loud? Shame. You show fear? Shame. You don't smile enough? Shame. And guess what? If you make the wrong impression, your own people might take you out to protect their honor. How fun, right? Now, let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture. You're a samurai. You live by the sword. But what happens when you lose? It's not just a loss. It's a disaster. A samurai's entire existence is tied to winning, or at least making sure your failure doesn't tarnish the family name. You lose a duel, your sword gets taken away. You fail in battle, well, your life might be over. You have no room for error. It's as though your entire identity depends on always being perfect. One wrong move, and it's game over. You want to talk about stress? Welcome to the samurai life. No pressure, though. But what if you're not a samurai? What if you're born into the artisan or merchant class? The life of an artisan might sound better than a peasant's, but don't be fooled. You're still not climbing the social ladder. Merchants, for instance, you're rich, but you're still at the bottom of the social order. Why? Because you're considered morally shady. You make money without working for it, and that's a huge no-no. So, you get no respect from those above you. If you're a merchant, you're considered a parasite of society. You make money by selling goods, not by tilling the land or fighting in battles. But hey, your pockets might be full of cash, but you're still not part of the elite. In feudal Japan, money doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you rich and socially relevant. But don't get too comfortable in the artisan or merchant class either. Remember, you're still trapped in the system. You don't get to do what you want. Your life is still planned out for you. You might be able to make money or craft beautiful things, but you can't move up. You can't change your status. You have to know your place and stay there. Want to go higher? Tough luck. That's not how the system works. Everyone has their role, and you better accept it. This is feudal Japan, my friend. Social mobility? Non-existent. So, whatever you do, just pray you were born a samurai. Because if you're not, well, good luck. All right, buckle up because things are about to get a whole lot worse. Now, let's say you're a peasant. You've been working your butt off in the rice field since the crack of dawn. You're sweating, aching, and starving. And you know what? That's just a regular Tuesday. The thing is, it's not just the physical labor that's draining you. No, it's a constant fear. Fear that the harvest won't be enough. Fear that the taxes will wipe out whatever little you've managed to grow. Fear that a bad storm will destroy everything you worked for. Imagine working day after day, month after month, only to be at the mercy of something as uncontrollable as the weather. And what happens when the rice fails? Oh, don't worry. That's not your problem. If the harvest fails, you're still expected to pay your taxes. No exceptions. You don't get to say, hey, sorry, my rice crop didn't work out this year. Oh no, the Lord will just come knocking, demanding the full amount of rice you owe. And if you don't have enough, well, that's when things get really ugly. The consequences for failing to meet your rice quota can range from being publicly punished, exiled, or, worst case scenario, having your head removed. It's a brutal system, and you're just a small pawn in a much larger game. But you know what? Even worse than that is the constant reminder that you don't matter. You're the foundation of this whole society. You work the land. You're the reason the samurai eat and the reason the lords live in luxury. But guess what? No one cares about you. You're just a cog in the machine. A worker. You don't get the respect. You don't get the glory. The samurai, they get to have all the fun. They get the swords. They get the honor. They get the lavish robes and the fancy feasts. And what do you get? A bowl of rice that's probably more dirt than food and an aching back from working in fields. No respect. No recognition. Just a life of endless labor. And let's talk about food for a second. Oh, the joy of a peasant's diet. It's not exactly what you call luxurious. If you're lucky, You'll get rice for every meal. Rice for breakfast. Rice for lunch. Rice for dinner. It's not even the good kind of rice, though. Nope, this is a cheap, bland rice. If you're really unlucky, you're eating barley pretending to be rice. Maybe you'll get some pickled turnips or radish, if the gods are feeling kind. But forget about meat. That's for the samurai and the lords. You're not getting any of that. Maybe, just maybe you'll get some fish, but not the fresh kind. No, it's the dried, salted, and tough fish that feels more like chewing on a rock than eating food. And then there's the soup. Miso soup, if you can even call it that. It's basically just hot, salty water with a couple of floating leaves. It's not something you want to eat, but hey, it's food, right? The whole concept of eating to survive is in full force here. The idea of enjoying food, it doesn't exist. You eat because you have to. You eat because it's necessary to keep working the fields. But forget about sitting down and savoring a meal. Meals are not for enjoyment. They're for survival. Every bite is just a reminder of how hard your life is, how little you have, and how trapped you are in this endless cycle. And what about the samurai? You think they're living the high life? Sure, they get fancy meals, but they're not exactly enjoying them. A samurai's meal isn't about the food. Oh no, it's all about the status. It's all about the hierarchy. You think you're going to sit down and eat whenever you want? Nah, that's not happening. You eat last. You wait while everyone else gets their fill. You watch your lord, his guests, and whoever else he feels like honoring feast, while you sit there, starving, pretending you're deeply honored to wait your turn. And when you finally get your meal, it's cold, it's not fresh, and it's not even that good. Cold rice, cold soup, maybe a little pickled radish. But here's the kicker. You better not show any emotion about it. You better not look like you're frustrated or hungry. You have to smile and pretend everything's perfectly fine. Because if you don't, well, you're just dishonoring yourself. And let's not forget about the seasons. You don't get food year-round. No refrigeration, no global supply chains. Whatever's in season is what you get. If it's winter, you're eating whatever was left over from the last harvest. That's it. And good luck with that, because if the harvest was bad, you're going to be starving. The samurai, meanwhile, are still eating their cold rice and soup because they're honorable and disciplined. No fresh food for you. But it's not just about food, right? There's also the fact that you're living in constant fear. Fear that someone's going to notice your dirty hands or your wrinkled clothes. If you're a samurai, you have to be perfect at all times. You can't have dirty fingernails, you can't have a wrinkled robe, and you sure as heck can't have body odor. That's dishonorable. And you know what happens when you're dishonorable? You're dead. Simple as that. It doesn't matter if you're starving. It doesn't matter if you're overworked. And it certainly doesn't matter if you're just having a bad day. If you screw up even a little, you're done. So what's your life as a samurai really like? Well, it's a constant battle to keep up appearances. You can't laugh too loud. You can't show fear. You can't even get emotional. Because if you do, you might as well kiss your head goodbye. The pressure to be perfect all the time is crushing. You think you're going to enjoy your life in this rigid system? Forget it. It's all about following the rules. Every move, every word, every gesture must be controlled. And if you mess up, well, there's no second chance. The only way out is through death, and that's not the kind of exit you want. Now, hold up. You've seen the samurai. You've seen the peasants. But let's take a second to zoom out and really see what's going on in this world. Picture it. You're in feudal Japan, and everything you do, from your clothes to your words, from your posture to your food, is under scrutiny. And the thing is, you can't escape it. Every part of your life is meticulously planned and perfectly controlled by a system that doesn't care if you're comfortable, if you're happy, or if you're even alive in a few years. You're just a tiny piece of machine that's been churning away for centuries, and you don't get to question it. You might think, okay, well, maybe the samurai and peasants have it rough, but surely there's some kind of freedom for the merchants or the artisans, right? Wrong. In feudal Japan, even if you have money, even if you have a skill, you're still stuck. You're still in a system that's designed to keep you in your place, no matter how much you try to rise above. The merchant class? They're rich. but they're still nothing compared to the samurai. You can have all the gold in the world, but if you don't work the land or serve in battle, you're still lower than the samurai, the true rulers of society. That means you don't get the respect, you don't get the glory, and worst of all, you don't get the power. Being born into a certain class, you don't get to change that. You can't decide you want to be something else. You can't just wake up one day and say, you know what? I want to be a samurai today. No, that's not how it works. In feudal Japan, you are assigned your role, and that's it. That's all you get. If you're born into a peasant family, you're going to be slaving away in the fields for your entire life. If you're born a merchant, you're going to be making money off the backs of the peasants, but you'll still never be able to climb the social ladder. There's no room to move up. And the thing is, this isn't just an issue of status. It's an issue of survival. Now, let's really talk about that. The class system isn't just about what you do or how much you make. It's about your worth to society. You, as a peasant, might work harder than anyone else, but your worth is measured by how much rice you can produce. You're a tool, a resource to be used by the samurai and lords who don't break a sweat all day. And that's just the reality. You might be working 12 hours a day, doing everything you can to keep the farm running. But it doesn't matter because you're just one tiny cog in this giant, ruthless machine. You don't matter unless you can provide something useful. If you're lucky enough to be born into a samurai family, you're still just a piece of property to be molded into perfection. Let's switch gears a little bit. You're now an artisan or a merchant. You've got a little more coin, a little more freedom, right? Well, kind of. You're still stuck. You might have money, but you're still treated like dirt by the samurai. They look at you like you're worthless. You make money, but you don't earn it the right way. You don't get to wield a sword or fight in a battle. You don't get the glory of war. And that's the one thing that the samurai have over you. They get respect because they fight. They get to live by their code, even though it's the most ridiculous set of rules ever written. And you're just over here selling things for a profit and still being judged for being lazy because you don't work the land or fight in wars. The irony? You're providing everything the samurai need to live comfortably. Without merchants and artisans, the samurai wouldn't be able to sustain their lifestyle. But don't expect any thanks for that. They'll just look at you with disdain, pretend you're invisible, and continue to treat you like garbage. It's kind of like this. Let's say you're a highly skilled artisan, making beautiful, intricate pieces of work. The kind of stuff that people would travel far and wide to get their hands on. But guess what? In feudal Japan, your skill means nothing unless you're serving the samurai. No one cares about your art. They care about your usefulness to the ruling class. You might be a genius with your hands, creating works of art that should be admired for generations. But if you're not a samurai, you're just another tool. Your value isn't in what you create. It's in how you serve the social structure. You could be the best in the world at what you do, but unless you're producing something for the samurai, you're just a cog in the machine. And don't even get me started on the merchants. If you're a merchant, you might be making decent money, but that money doesn't get you any respect. You don't earn the right to be considered noble. You don't earn the right to be honored. The merchant class is viewed as lazy, untrustworthy, and morally bankrupt. You're making money without working the land, and that's a crime in itself. To the samurai, you're just a necessary evil. You're like the rat in the corner of the room that everyone knows is there, but no one wants to acknowledge. What does this all mean? It means you're stuck. You're stuck in your class, in your role, and there's no way out. You can't change it. You can't rise above it. In feudal Japan, you're either born into a samurai family or you're not. And if you're not, well, then you're just here to serve. And that's the harsh truth. The system doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your aspirations. It doesn't care about anything but maintaining the status quo. And if you think you can break free, think again. This is feudal Japan, and you're not going anywhere. Now, here's the wild part. It's not just the peasants or the merchants who are stuck in this system. No, it's everyone. Even the samurai, who you thought had it all figured out, are chained to this brutal, suffocating system. Sure, they've got the swords, the fancy armor, the respect, at least from those lower than them. But that doesn't make their life easy. In fact, it's the opposite. Being a samurai is like living on the edge of a cliff. One wrong move and boom, you fall into disaster. Everything you do is scrutinized. You sneeze the wrong way? Shame. You look at someone the wrong way? Shame. You forget to bow deeply enough? Shame. There's no room for error. You're on a constant tightrope, and if you even flinch the wrong way, you're done. Now, let's talk about the system that governs these poor samurai. The whole point of being a samurai is to uphold a code of honor called Bushido. Sounds noble, right? The way of the warrior. But let's get real. It's not about honor, it's about fear. The samurai aren't fighting to protect anyone. They're fighting to survive. They're fighting to avoid the one thing that terrifies them more than anything: dishonor. A samurai's honor is everything. If they lose their honor, they lose their entire identity. Forget about it. The only way to get that honor back is through seppuku. Yeah, that's right. If you screw up big enough, your way out is to kill yourself. You're not just fighting for the Lord, the land, or the people. You're fighting to protect your own soul from disgrace.
Let's pause and really think about that for a moment. You're a samurai. You wake up every day with the knowledge that one mistake could mean the end of everything. You make one tiny slip-up and it's not just a bad day at work. No. It's a loss of honor that could end in your death. If you accidentally insult someone, if you sneeze at the wrong moment, if you fail to do the one thing your Lord expects from you, it could cost you everything. And guess what? You can't just leave. You can't quit. You can't even express fear. You've got to carry that weight around 24/7 and it's crushing. Imagine for a second you're a samurai and you're sitting down to eat. You've worked hard all day, trained, practiced your swordplay, written your haiku, and now it's time for dinner. But guess what? You don't eat first. No. Your Lord and his guests eat before you. You sit there, starving, waiting for your turn. And when you finally get your meal, it's cold, it's bland, and you have to pretend like it's the best thing you've ever eaten. Can you even imagine? You spend all day fighting and working, all for a cold bowl of rice and some tasteless soup. But guess what? If you show any sign of dissatisfaction, you're in trouble. Your Lord might just decide you've disrespected him. And that could mean the end of your career, or your life. But it gets even crazier. Let's talk about the samurai's mental state for a second. You're constantly living under this insane pressure. Every day you're fighting to maintain a perfect image. You've got to be perfect in everything you do. Your posture? Perfect. Your food? Perfect. Your every action must scream honor and discipline. Laughing too loud? Shame. Crying? Shame. Feeling fear or weakness? You guessed it, shame. And if you slip up? Well, then it's back to seppuku, my friend. There's no recovery. There's no going back. Your entire life, every moment, is controlled by this unrelenting pressure to be perfect. And that pressure doesn't just weigh on you, it weighs on your entire family. One mistake, one wrong move, and your ancestors are brought into the mix. Your failure becomes their failure. You're not just disappointing your Lord, you're disappointing centuries of history. That's how deep the shame runs. It's not just your life you're worried about. It's the weight of every samurai who's ever lived. And let's talk about the mental gymnastics you have to do just to survive each day. You've got to keep up appearances. You've got to be calm and composed at all times. You have to walk, talk, and act like you've never known joy. You want to show fear? Show excitement? Show happiness? Forget it. That's a one-way ticket to disaster. The samurai, they're trained to be emotionless like robots in armor. You're never supposed to let people see the real you. Your feelings? They're a liability. Your humanity? It's a threat to your survival. And the worst part is, even when you're doing everything right, following the code, bowing properly, fighting well, you're still constantly living in fear. Not of battle. Not of your enemies. But of something much worse, dishonor. You might win every battle, be the best warrior in your clan, and still, at any moment, you could slip up and lose your place. And losing your place isn't just about a demotion. No. In feudal Japan, losing your honor could mean death. And that's the samurai's life. Day in, day out. Constantly walking a razor's edge with the weight of centuries of tradition and honor on your shoulders. You could be the greatest warrior in Japan and still, one small mistake would be enough to wipe it all away. Alright, now let's take a breather and imagine this. You've been working all day in the scorching sun, your back aching, your hands raw from pulling weeds, or maybe you're a samurai, exhausted after hours of battle drills. Your stomach's growling, your mind's exhausted, and it's finally time for a meal. You're starving, but here's the catch. The food you're about to eat isn't about comfort. It's about surviving. It's not even about taste. It's all about keeping your body functional enough to keep working. Because if you don't, you'll be useless to the system. That's right. You're not eating for enjoyment. You're eating for survival. Now picture this, a bowl of cold rice. Maybe a little pickled radish on the side if you're lucky. That's your meal. Doesn't sound like much, right? That's because it isn't. It's not meant to be fancy. It's not meant to be satisfying. It's meant to keep you alive so you can go right back to the fields or the training ground or whatever it is you've been forced to do all day. But here's the twist. You better not complain about it. You can't look disappointed. You can't show that you're hungry for something more. That would be dishonorable. Even if your stomach is literally begging for something with flavor, you have to sit there with a straight face and eat that bland, tasteless food like it's the best thing you've ever tasted. Imagine being a samurai, right? You've been out there all day, training with your sword, practicing your moves, doing everything you can to uphold the honor of your family. You're drenched in sweat, your body sore, your energy drained, but it's time to eat. The big feast is happening, except it's not for you. You wait, and you wait, and you wait. While your lord and his guests get the best of everything, you're stuck sitting there just waiting for your turn. Your food? A cold, bland meal that's just there to fuel you for the next round of perfection you need to uphold. If you show frustration, if you even look like you're not grateful, shame. Simple as that. You think I'm exaggerating? Let me hit you with the hard truth. In feudal Japan, food wasn't a luxury. It wasn't something you'd sit down to enjoy. It was a means to an end. For the peasants, it was a bowl of rice, maybe a turnip or some dried fish, depending on what little could be scraped together. And for the samurai, it was pretty much the same. Rice, maybe some pickled vegetables, and absolutely nothing extravagant. You see, the food wasn't about enjoyment. It was about control. It was about making sure you could keep going. You weren't supposed to feel good. You weren't supposed to enjoy what you were eating. You were supposed to eat and get back to work. This wasn't a society that rewarded relaxation, indulgence, or even basic enjoyment. It rewarded endurance. How long could you keep going? How much could you handle before you broke? But it's not just about food. Oh no. Let's talk about the whole lifestyle aspect of things. As a samurai, you don't get to just hang out with your friends, share a laugh, or crack a joke. That's beneath you. You don't get to be human. Your whole existence is defined by this thing called duty. You can't show joy, you can't show fear, and you definitely can't show weakness. Imagine being constantly aware that if you let your guard down for even a second, it could cost you your life. You can't laugh too loud. You can't shed a tear. You can't even express that you're tired. Why? Because you're supposed to be strong, perfect, composed, at all times. If you're anything less than that, well, then you're not living up to the standards of a samurai. And that's the highest insult you can give yourself.
Let's talk about discipline for a second. A samurai's discipline is more than just training. It's more than just knowing how to fight. It's about creating this almost robotic state of perfection where every action, every word, and every gesture is perfectly measured. And guess what? If you slip up, even for a moment, everything can come crashing down. A samurai's life isn't about glory. It's about surviving the pressure of living up to these insane expectations. You're walking a tightrope, constantly balancing between honor and disgrace. The worst part, if you fall, you're not just failing yourself. You're failing your ancestors, your family, your entire legacy. You become a disgrace to everything that's ever come before you. That's the ultimate punishment. And then there's the ultimate question. What happens when you fail? I mean, when you really fail. Not just the small stuff, but the big stuff. When you lose a battle, when you dishonor your lord, when you screw up in such a monumental way that there's no coming back from it. In feudal Japan, there's only one way to atone for that kind of failure. Seppuku, ritual suicide. And let me tell you, it's not like just picking up a knife and calling it a day. It's a whole process. You've got to prepare yourself mentally and physically. You got to be calm, composed, and ready to face your end with the same level of discipline that's been drilled into you your entire life. You're not allowed to be afraid. You're not allowed to be emotional. You die with grace, with dignity. Because if you don't, well, you've just added more disgrace to your name. The thing about seppuku is, it's not just about you anymore. It's about your entire legacy, your family's legacy. The moment you end your life in that way, you're not just ending your existence. You're making sure that your failure is immortalized. Your disgrace, it becomes part of history. Your family will forever be known as the ones who didn't measure up, the ones who couldn't live up to the expectations of feudal Japan. Talk about pressure. Imagine living with that every single day. All right, let's take a moment and shift gears, because while we've been talking about how the samurai and peasants have to constantly deal with this system of pressure and failure, there's one other group in feudal Japan who absolutely do not get the luxury of choice: the women. And trust me, the women of feudal Japan, they don't just have it tough. They're almost completely invisible. Let's break it down. If you're a woman in feudal Japan, your life is planned out before you even know how to speak. You're not here to dream, to explore, or to live for yourself. Your existence? It's all about duty. Duty to your family. Duty to your husband. Duty to your ancestors. You're not allowed to make your own decisions. Forget about marrying for love. Forget about pursuing your own career. Your marriage? That's a business arrangement. You don't get a say in it. It's about keeping the family strong, keeping the line intact. Your role is set, and that's that. And let's talk about how they treat women in this system. Imagine this. You're a woman, and you don't even get the privilege of talking openly. You want to speak? Better be careful. You're supposed to be quiet, demure, and obedient at all times. God forbid you express any of your feelings or desires. You're not allowed to. It's not just a matter of social expectation. It's the law. If you step out of line in the slightest, you're going to be punished. And we're not talking about a simple scolding here. We're talking about real consequences. Public humiliation, exclusion, or even worse. The thing is, in feudal Japan, women are not just kept in their place. They're silenced into submission. But it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about the restrictions they face. If you're a woman in feudal Japan, your choices are severely limited. You're essentially the property of your father or husband. When you're born, you're not just a human being. You're an object. You're something to be married off, something to carry on the family line. The idea of a woman doing something for herself? It's practically unheard of. And this isn't just some theoretical issue. This is real. This is every day for generations of women who are raised to accept this reality. Your worth isn't in what you can do. It's in how well you serve your family's needs, your husband's needs, and society's needs. You don't get to be you. You don't get to dream. You get to obey. Now, let's think about the other half of the equation. You're a samurai and you've got a wife. Guess what? She's just as locked into the system as you are, but the rules are even stricter. She's supposed to stay at home, take care of the household, and raise your children. You can have your swords, your battles, your honor, but her world is defined by domestic duties. There's no option for her to go out and fight. No place for her to rise above what society has assigned her. She's a reflection of you. She's a reflection of your family's honor. Her behavior? That's your behavior. 2. One slip up, one mistake. And it's not just her that suffers. It's your entire family. The weight of her actions is on your shoulders just as much as your own. And when it comes to love, don't even get me started. Love in feudal Japan isn't about choice. It's about strategy. It's about political alliances and securing the family's future. You might get married at a young age, and the idea of being with someone for your own happiness? That's a fantasy, not a reality. You're married for survival. You're married to maintain power, wealth, and family legacy. Your personal feelings? Irrelevant. You're expected to be a good wife, a dutiful wife, and most importantly, a silent wife. If you get caught expressing desires, opinions, or anything else that's not perfectly acceptable, that's when things get dangerous. Your husband, your family, and society as a whole will come crashing down on you. And let's not forget about the women who weren't born into samurai families. If you were born a peasant woman, your life is even harder. Not only are you expected to work in the fields, but you also have to bear children and care for your family. And the worst part? You're probably going to die young. You're working from dawn till dusk in the fields, planting, harvesting, doing everything you can to help the family survive. But your health? It's not a priority. If you get sick, too bad. You still have to work. You don't get the luxury of rest. Your body is just another tool to be used in the cycle of survival. Your health is nothing more than an afterthought. So what does this all mean? It means that no matter who you are, no matter what class you were born into, no one in feudal Japan is free. Everyone is trapped. Whether you're a peasant, a samurai, or a woman, you're all stuck playing roles that were assigned to you before you even had a say. Your life, your worth, your existence is defined by what's expected of you. And heaven help you if you ever step out of line, if you ever try to be something more. You don't get to decide who you are. That decision was made for you the moment you were born. The system doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about your dreams, your desires, your happiness. All it cares about is keeping things running smoothly. If you don't fit in, you don't survive. All right, let's pull back for a second and take a look at what we've learned so far. You got samurai, peasants, merchants, and women all locked into this tight, suffocating system. Everyone's stuck, and no one has a real choice. You got men fighting to uphold honor, peasant families scraping by, and women just trying to survive while their every move is dictated by society's brutal expectations. But here's where things get interesting. The system doesn't just control people. It breaks them. It wears them down. It grinds them into the dirt until they don't even remember who they were before the weight of it all crushed them. Take the samurai, for instance. Let's say you've been training your entire life, learning how to wield a sword, perfecting your battle tactics, and living under the constant pressure of being the perfect warrior. But what happens when you start to break? What happens when you can't hold it together anymore? What happens when the weight of that relentless expectation finally crushes your spirit? You'd think that as a samurai, you'd have it made. You're a warrior, you've got honor, you've got respect. But when you really look closely, it's a prison. A gilded prison, sure, but a prison nonetheless. You're expected to fight, to be disciplined, to uphold tradition. You're expected to follow Bushido like it's a sacred law, even if it's slowly killing you from the inside. You're not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to show weakness. And as you age, as your body starts to feel the wear and tear of battle and constant training, you realize something. The system isn't just demanding perfection. It's demanding that you break. It's forcing you to break, to crack under the pressure, and if you do, there's no way out. You can't retire. You can't just walk away. If you break, if you lose your honor, your life is over. There's no place for failure in feudal Japan. There's no forgiveness. And that's where the tragedy lies. Now, let's talk about the peasants for a second. You've been working the land your whole life. Your back is sore from all that labor. Your hands are calloused and cracked from the constant toil, and you've been feeding the samurai and the lords who live in luxury while you scrape by with what little you have. You're stuck. You've got no mobility. You can't go up. You can't escape. You can't even leave your village without permission. You don't get to make your own decisions. You don't get to choose your life. You're just here to serve, to work, to survive. And even if you work harder than anyone else, even if you produce the best rice, even if you somehow manage to avoid disaster year after year, guess what? It's never enough. The system is designed to make sure you're always struggling. You're always in debt. You're always fighting for just a little bit more. But you never get ahead. You can never rest. You can never relax. The minute you think you're starting to climb, the system kicks you right back down. What about the merchants? The merchants. You got some money, but guess what? That money doesn't get you any respect. That wealth doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you rich. But you're still at the bottom of the social ladder. The samurai and the lords, they see you as nothing but a parasite. You don't work the land. You don't fight in battles. You don't do anything that really matters. You're just here to make a profit, to take from the people who actually do the hard work. But the thing is, without you, the entire system would collapse. Without merchants, the samurai wouldn't get their fancy weapons or silk robes. Without you, the lords wouldn't have the goods they need to live comfortably. But that's not something the samurai care about. They don't respect you. They look at you with disdain. You make money, but you're not useful in their eyes. And no matter how much you make, you'll never get the respect or power that they have. You're just a rich nobody. And then, of course, there are the women. Poor, powerless women. Born into a system where your worth is measured by your ability to serve your family, your husband, and the men around you. You don't get a say in your life. You don't get to dream, to aspire, to live for yourself. Your life is mapped out before you even know what life is. You're married off as a political pawn. Your voice is silenced. Your choices? Non-existent. You're born to serve, and you die having served. No one cares about your hopes or your desires. If you step out of line, if you speak out, if you try to do anything other than what is expected of you, you're punished, publicly, harshly. You'll be shamed. You'll be ostracized. Your failure is your family's failure. And that failure doesn't just disappear. It's a stain on your entire family line. The expectations are too high, the pressure too much. And if you crack, there's no mercy. You're erased. Now, let's get to the heart of the issue. The truth about feudal Japan isn't that people lived terrible lives. It's that they lived meaningless lives. Everyone, no matter their class, was trapped in a system that never allowed them to be free. No one got to choose their fate. No one got to choose their role in society. You were born into it, and that was it. You could be the greatest warrior, the hardest working peasant, or the most talented artisan, but you would always be defined by what you were born into. And in a system where honor and duty are everything, the pressure to live up to those ideals doesn't just break people, it destroys them. Let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture for a moment. Feudal Japan is a world that's defined by rigidity. The hierarchy is unshakable. The roles are preordained. The idea of freedom, of making your own decisions, of choosing your own fate, it's a distant fantasy. Everyone's locked in place, from the lowliest peasant to the highest-ranking samurai, and the rules that govern the society aren't just written in books. They're embedded into every action, every gesture, and every thought. It's a culture where conformity is not only expected, it's demanded. You don't question the system. You don't challenge the hierarchy. You don't dare dream of anything outside the box. And if you do, well, let's just say you don't have a very long life to live. But here's the kicker. Despite all this order, despite all this structure, there's a crack in the system, a tiny sliver of hope, a spark of rebellion that flickers in the hearts of a few who dare to challenge the status quo. See, in feudal Japan, no one was truly free, but that doesn't mean they were all the same. There were those who, despite the system, found ways to bend the rules, to twist the expectations, to carve out their own little space in a world that wasn't built for them. And I'm not talking about samurai or lords. No, I'm talking about the outliers, the artisans who could make something so beautiful that even the samurai had to take notice, the merchants who quietly amassed wealth in a world that condemned them, the women who found a way to leave a mark, even in a society that would rather erase them entirely. But these people, they're not the rule. They're the exception. For the most part, the system works. And it works well. For the samurai, for the lords, and for everyone who holds power, it's a smooth, efficient machine that produces exactly what it needs. Rice, weapons, silk. The life of feudal Japan is built on the backs of those who have no power, no choice, and no voice. It's a society that runs on fear, on the idea that if you step out of line for even a moment, you're gone. You disappear. You're erased. Your name is forgotten. And everything you worked for, lost. But in a system this oppressive, this tight, one wrong move can set everything off. One mistake can bring the whole house of cards crashing down. And when that happens, it's not just the person who made the mistake who suffers. Oh no, the entire family, the entire village, the entire community is dragged down with them. The consequences of failure in feudal Japan are collective. You don't fail alone. You fail as a group. You fail as a society. And if you're unlucky enough to be the one who's blamed, well, you're not just the person who made the mistake. You're the person who brought shame to everyone. You're the person who doomed the future. You're the one who's going to pay the price. It's a terrifying thought, right? Knowing that one small mistake, one slip-up, could ruin everything? That's the reality in feudal Japan. Whether you're a samurai, a peasant, a merchant, or even a woman, you're always living under the shadow of that fear, that constant pressure to be perfect, to follow the rules, to never, ever step out of line. And if you do, well, it's not just you who suffers. It's everyone you love, everyone you care about, everyone who depends on you. Your mistake becomes their mistake. Your dishonor becomes their dishonor. And that's a weight no one can escape from. But even in the face of all this, even when the pressure is crushing and the stakes are life and death, there's something kind of fascinating about feudal Japan. Despite all the rules, all the suffering, all the sacrifice, there's a beauty to it. It's a culture built on discipline, on honor, on the idea that everything you do matters, that everything you say has weight. It's a world where every single action is taken with thought and care, where you can't afford to be sloppy, to be lazy, or to be less than your best. And while that might sound exhausting, and trust me it is, there's a certain poetry to it. A samurai's life isn't about living. It's about leaving a legacy. It's about ensuring that your honor outlasts you. It's about making sure that the story of who you were and what you stood for is told long after you're gone. And maybe, just maybe, that's the one thing that keeps them going. But that beauty is a double-edged sword. Because as much as honor can drive you, it can also break you. It can tear you apart, piece by piece, until there's nothing left. And that's the dark side of the system. The one that no one talks about. The one that's buried under all the glory, all the tradition, all the respect. Because in the end, honor isn't shield. It's a trap that keeps you locked in place. A trap that keeps you from being free. A trap that makes sure you can never, ever escape the world that's been built around you. So, you've made it this far. You've learned about the pressure, the expectations, and the constant fear that runs through feudal Japan like an unbreakable thread. But let's zoom out even further for a moment and talk about the thing that keeps everything going, the infrastructure of the system. You think it's just about samurai with their swords, peasants with their rice, and merchants with their coin? Nah. It's about the entire machinery, the web of power that connects everyone, from the lowliest farmer to the highest noble. Picture it. The whole society operates in this perfectly synchronized system where everyone plays their part. It's like a giant, delicate machine that requires every cog to turn in exactly the right way. The peasants work the land. The samurai protect the land. The merchants distribute goods. And the lords? Well, they sit on top, enjoying the benefits of everyone else's hard work, maintaining a stronghold of control and authority. But here's the thing, without the peasants, there's no rice. Without the samurai, there's no protection. Without the merchants, there's no trade. Without the lords, there's no structure. It's an ecosystem where everyone's contribution matters, but not everyone is treated equally. Now let's break it down. If you're a peasant, you don't get to just work the land however you like. Oh no, you're working for the Lord. Your crops go straight to him. Your labor goes straight to him. And in return, well, you get to survive. You get just enough rice to feed your family and hope that your crops don't fail, your taxes aren't too high, and your Lord doesn't demand too much. That's it. You're a cog in a machine, doing all the heavy lifting, but you don't get a taste the fruits of your labor. You're giving everything you have just to keep the system running. And the worst part? You can't even get upset about it. You can't complain. You can't even dream of doing something else, because the moment you step out of line, the system comes crashing down on you. But here's where it gets even messier. Let's talk about the merchants for a second. You might think, well, they're rich. They've got money. They've got power. And in some ways, you'd be right. They're the ones who control the flow of goods, the lifeblood of the economy. But here's the catch. They're still at the bottom of the totem pole. The samurai look at them with disdain. They're viewed as parasitic, lazy, and morally corrupt because they're not the ones working the land or fighting in battles. They're not upholding honor. They're just selling things, making money off of everyone else's work. And for that, they're not respected. They might have money, but they don't have power. They don't have glory. They don't have honor. They're just here to keep the wheels turning, moving goods from one place to another, but they're never going to get the same respect as the samurai or the lords. They're still part of the system, but they're the ones who get the short end of the stick. And don't even get me started on the women. Oh, the women. You'd think they would be at least somewhat exempt from the harsh realities of feudal Japan, right? Wrong. Women have one primary role, and that's to keep the family line going. Whether you're a samurai's wife or a peasant's daughter, your life is defined by your ability to support the family, bear children, and obey your husband. And the expectations? They are sky high. You don't get to speak unless spoken to. You don't get to choose your future. You don't get to pick who you marry. If you're a woman, you don't have agency. Your job is to serve, and that's all. There's no room for ambition. There's no room for you. But here's the thing, as locked into the system as they are, even the women of feudal Japan can sometimes find ways to bend the rules. Not break them, but bend them. You see, despite all the restrictions, women still manage to leave their mark on the world, whether it was in the form of art, in the form of being an influential figure in their family, or even in rare cases, taking part in politics. Some women found a way to push against the boundaries they were given, but for the most part, that was the exception, not the rule. The reality for women in feudal Japan was bleak. Their worth was determined by their ability to serve the men in their lives, and no matter how intelligent, capable, or talented they might be, they were always going to be held back by the suffocating expectations of society. It's a brutal reality for anyone caught in the system. No matter who you are, you're stuck playing a role that society has decided for you. You can't move up. You can't move down. You can't break free. You can't even dream of escaping. The samurai are locked into their code of honor. The peasants are locked into their labor. The merchants are locked into their status. And the women, well, they're locked into a system that doesn't even let them have a voice. This system doesn't care about individuality. It doesn't care about dreams. It doesn't care about who you are or what you want. It only cares about keeping the machine running smoothly. And if you don't fit into the machine, well, that's when the system gets rid of you. You're thrown away, forgotten, and the worst part? The machine keeps turning, with no thought for the people who are crushed under it. At this point, you're probably wondering, how the heck does anyone survive this? How does anyone manage to live under the crushing weight of expectations, where every mistake is a death sentence and every move is scrutinized? The answer is, well, they don't. Not really. There's no true survival in this system. There's just endurance. It's not about thriving. It's about getting through each day, keeping your head down, and hoping you don't mess up. If you manage to scrape by, if you make it through the endless grind of life without making a fatal mistake, then maybe, just maybe, you'll get to live another day. But survival in this world isn't the same as living. Take the peasants. You work all day, every day, just to get enough rice to feed yourself and your family. You wake up before the sun rises and work until your hands are raw. Your back is sore and your body's exhausted. And for what? To give the rice you worked so hard to grow to the Lord, who doesn't break a sweat, who just takes from you, taxes you, and then lets you suffer. You don't get to choose what to do with your life. You don't get to choose your future. You're stuck in a cycle of survival. It's not about living, it's about enduring. And every time you think it can't get worse, it does. The weather turns on you. The harvest fails. The taxes increase. The Lord demands more. The system never lets up. It's a constant battle. And the only thing you can do is keep going, keep working, keep fighting to stay alive. The worst part? You can't even ask for help. You can't complain. You can't show weakness. The moment you do, you failed. You failed yourself, your family, and the entire system. You're not allowed to be human in feudal Japan. You're not allowed to have emotions. You're not allowed to ask for help. You're not allowed to even think about anything outside the scope of survival. You're just a tool, a cog in a much larger machine. And if you break, there's no one to pick up the pieces. There's no compassion. There's no understanding. There's only the system, and the system doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about your struggles. It only cares about its own survival. But it's not just the peasants who are caught in this trap. The samurai, they might have a higher social standing, but their lives are just as trapped, just as defined by the system. You think being a samurai is all about glory and honor, right? But let's talk about what that really means. Honor in feudal Japan isn't something you get to enjoy. It's something you have to earn every single second of your life. Every action, every word, every gesture has to be perfect. You have to follow the rules. You have to live by Bushido. You have to be the epitome of strength, discipline, and honor. But here's the catch. You don't get to live for yourself. You live for your family's honor, for your Lord's honor, for the greater good of society. You're constantly walking a tightrope, never allowed to slip, never allowed to make a mistake. The minute you show weakness, the minute you fail, you're done. You're a disgrace to your family, your ancestors, and the entire warrior class. And the worst part? There's no escaping it. There's no retiring. There's no taking a break. You're trapped in this code of honor until the day you die. You could be the best warrior, the strongest fighter, the most disciplined samurai in Japan. But if you slip up even once, that's it. You've dishonored yourself. You've dishonored your family. And you've dishonored the samurai code. And there's only one way to fix that: seppuku, a ritual suicide. Because in feudal Japan, if you fail, there's no redemption. There's no second chance. You don't get to say, hey, I messed up, but I'll try again. No, if you fail, you're gone. Simple as that. Honor is everything. Without it, you're nothing. And even if you manage to maintain your honor, even if you follow the rules and live your life by the strictest codes of Bushido, you're still trapped. You're still bound by duty, by responsibility, by tradition. Your life isn't your own. Your every action is dictated by your social status, your lord, and the expectations of the samurai code. You can't escape. You can't change. You can't evolve. You're stuck in this rigid system that doesn't care about your personal desires or your dreams. You're a soldier, a warrior, a servant of system. Your only purpose is to maintain the status quo, to uphold the ideals of honor, and to fight for your lord. And if you fail at any of that, well, you know the price. Seppuku. It's a vicious cycle. Whether you're a peasant, a samurai, or even a merchant, you're stuck in this system that's designed to break you, to wear you down, to keep you in line. You don't get to choose your future. You don't get to dream. You don't get to live for yourself. You're just surviving. Every day, every minute, every hour. And the worst part? Even if you make it through, even if you do everything right, even if you follow all the rules, you're still not free. You're still locked in this cycle, this machine that never stops turning. You're still bound to the system that controls you, and you always will be. Now, we've talked about the never-ending cycle of fear, duty, and honor that binds everyone in feudal Japan, the peasants, the samurai, the merchants, and the women. But let's dive into the real heart of the matter, the system itself. Why does it work the way it does? Why is it so rigid, so unforgiving, so suffocating? The answer, in simple terms, is control. Feudal Japan, with all its codes and rules, isn't just about maintaining order. It's about total control. At its core, the system is designed to keep everyone in their place, to make sure that no one rises too high or falls too low. You're a peasant? Stay in the fields. You're a samurai? Stay in the barracks and fight. You're a merchant? Well, tough luck. You don't matter unless you serve the higher classes. The entire system, from the top to the bottom, is structured in a way that doesn't allow for movement. It's a world where social mobility doesn't exist. You can't just work hard and rise up the ranks. You can't save up and become someone important. You can't be born a peasant and end up a samurai. And do you know why? Because if you're allowed to move, to change, to grow beyond your station, the whole thing falls apart. Feudal Japan is built on a strict hierarchy, a rigid order that ensures everything stays where it's supposed to be. And the worst part? The people who are in power? They need the system to stay exactly the way it is. Why? Because if anything changes, if even a single person rises up and challenges the status quo, the whole system is in jeopardy. The samurai rely on the peasants to do their dirty work. The lords rely on the samurai to protect them. And the merchants? They rely on everyone to buy their goods and make them rich. Everyone plays their part. No one steps out of line. No one questions authority. Because if you do, the entire foundation of society collapses. Now, think about that for a second. The very structure of feudal Japan depends on the complete obedience of every single person. It's a delicate balancing act, and the moment someone refuses to play their part, the whole thing could crumble. The samurai need their honor. The peasants need their survival. The merchants need their trade, and the women, well, they need to stay silent. That's how the system works. Everyone is trapped, stuck in their role, playing their part to keep the world spinning. And you know what's insane? The samurai, the very warriors who enforce this order, are just as trapped as the peasants. They might be higher on the social ladder, but they're still bound by the same rigid rules. They have to live up to this insane standard of discipline, of perfection, of honor. And if they don't, well, then their whole world falls apart. They have to keep fighting. They have to keep adhering to Bushido. They have to keep pushing themselves day after day, hour after hour, because if they don't, they'll fall from grace. They'll lose their honor. They'll lose their place. And they'll be left with nothing. And guess what happens then? They're discarded. They're erased, just like everyone else. So, the samurai live in fear not of death, but dishonor. They live in constant dread that one wrong move will ruin everything. But the peasants? They live in fear not of dishonor, but of starvation, of punishment, of watching their families suffer for something they can't control. The merchants? They live in fear being seen as greedy, as parasitic, as someone unworthy of respect. And the women? They live in fear of speaking out, of having any ambition, of being seen as anything other than obedient and silent. The entire society is built on fear, not the fear of dying, but the fear of disgrace. And that disgrace? It's the one thing no one can escape. And that's the kicker, isn't it? No one gets to live their life. Not really. You're just a cog in the machine. You do what you're told. You survive. You fight. You work. You stay in your place, and that's it. You can't rise. You can't move. You can't dream. Your role is set the moment you're born, and if you dare step out of it, you'll be crushed by the weight of the system. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. Despite the brutality of the system, despite the suffocating control, there's something intriguing about it. There's a certain tragic beauty to it. Everyone knows their place. Everyone knows what's expected of them. And that's both the strength and the flaw of feudal Japan. You can see the whole society functioning like a well-oiled machine. It works. It's efficient. It's predictable. But at the same time, it's terrifying. It's terrifying because you're not allowed to be human. You're not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to show weakness. You're just a small piece of a much larger puzzle, and the minute you stop fitting into that puzzle, you're cast aside, discarded, forgotten. And that's the dark truth of feudal Japan. Everyone is trapped. Everyone is caught in a system that doesn't care about who they are. It only cares about what they can do. And when they can't do it anymore, they're thrown away, replaced by the next person who can fill the role. There's no compassion. There's no forgiveness. There's only survival. And even that isn't guaranteed. By now, you might be thinking, okay, we get it. Feudal Japan was a brutal, unforgiving system where no one had a say in their future. So what's the point? Well, here's where things get interesting. Despite all the pressure, all the suffering, and all the control, there's still something about the system that works. You see, in a world that's as rigid as feudal Japan, where every class knows its place and the rules never change, there's a certain sense of security. Sure, it's not the kind of security that lets you dream or live for yourself, but it's security in the sense that you know exactly what's expected of you. You don't have to worry about failing because you already know your role. You know exactly how to act. You know what's coming next. It's predictable. It's constant. And for some, that's exactly what they need. Think about the samurai for a second. They wake up every day knowing exactly what they have to do. Their duty? It's clear. Their code? It's laid out for them. There's no guesswork. No uncertainty. You either uphold your honor or you don't. There's no middle ground. No second chances. That's both terrifying and comforting. Sure, it's terrifying because you're constantly walking on the edge, but at least you know the stakes. You understand what's expected. And when you live a life with that kind of clarity, you don't have to worry about the unknown. You just follow the rules and hope you don't slip up.
For the peasants, it's similar. Their lives are brutal. They work from sunup to sundown with barely enough food to get by. But in a way, they know their place. They know what's expected of them. They know that if they work hard enough, they'll survive. It's not glamorous. It's not ideal. But it's a form of stability. They don't have to worry about rising too high or falling too low. They just work. They endure. And they survive. The system keeps them in line, but it also keeps them secure in their role. There's no need to question what comes next because everything is already laid out for them. The merchants? Well, they might be stuck at the bottom of the totem pole, but they've got money. And in feudal Japan, money doesn't buy you respect, but it does buy you some security. Sure, you might not have the glory of the samurai, but you can at least avoid starving to death. You might not have the honor or the prestige, but you can buy the things you need to survive. You've got a little more breathing room than the peasants. You've got a little more power, even if it's only because you have coin. And that, in itself, is a form of security. You know that, at least in this world, money talks. And what about the women? Well, their lives are undoubtedly the toughest. They're stuck in a system that keeps them completely controlled, completely silent, and completely invisible. But even they find some form of stability in the roles they play. The expectations of women are clear. You do what's expected of you, you marry who you're told to, and you serve your family. And if you follow the rules, there's a strange kind of security in that. It's not a life of freedom or personal fulfillment, but it's a life where you know exactly what's expected. It's a life where you don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to decide what your future holds because it's already decided for you. It's a suffocating kind of security, but it's security nonetheless. But here's the catch. The security of feudal Japan comes at a massive cost. That predictability? It's also a prison. Everyone, from the samurai to the peasants, is trapped in their role, locked into this unchanging system that doesn't allow for growth, change, or evolution. If you're born a peasant, that's it. You're a peasant. If you're born a samurai, you're a samurai. And there's no getting out of it. No matter how hard you work, no matter how much you achieve, you can't change your place in the world. You're stuck. And what happens when someone tries to break free? Well, we've seen it already. The system punishes them. It erases them. If you try to rise above your station, if you try to be more than what society has told you to be, the system pushes back. And that's when things get really ugly. When you challenge the system, when you try to escape its grip, you're no longer part of the world. You're an outcast, a disgrace. The system doesn't just reject you, it destroys you. That's why in feudal Japan, people don't fight for freedom. They fight for survival. They fight to stay within the system because the moment they step outside of it, they lose everything. They lose their identity, their family's honor, and their place in the world. So they endure. They accept the system because it's the only thing that keeps them alive. It's the only thing that gives them a sense of purpose. It's a terrible, brutal system, but it's the only system they know. And for some, that's enough. But the truth is, even in a world that's designed to crush you, there's something in human nature that pushes back. There's always someone somewhere who doesn't just accept their role. There's always someone who dreams of more. And that's the tension that runs through the heart of feudal Japan. The system might control everyone, but it can't control everything. It can't control your spirit. It can't control your will to break free. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because even the smallest spark of rebellion can set everything on fire. But here's where things start to get even more fascinating. Even with all this control, all this rigidity, and all these suffocating rules, there's still a deep undercurrent of rebellion in feudal Japan. I know, it sounds crazy, right? How could anyone rebel against a system where the consequences are so dire, where failure equals death, where one small mistake could erase your entire existence? But let's take a closer look at what happens when the system is pushed to its breaking point. Because the truth is, despite all the rules, despite all the discipline, there's always someone looking to break free. Think about it. There's this intense pressure, this expectation that everyone plays their part, that everyone follows the rules, that everyone remains in their place. And when you live in a world that's designed to keep you down, to crush your dreams, to force you into a mold, it's only natural that some people are going to push back. And while we usually associate rebellion with the samurai or some heroic figure leading a revolution, in feudal Japan, rebellion came in much smaller, quieter forms. Take the artisans, for instance. These guys? They were the artists, the builders, the creators. The ones who could actually make something beautiful in a world that prized utility over everything else. You might think, how could they rebel against anything? They were at the bottom of the social hierarchy. But here's the thing, they didn't need to rise up on a battlefield to rebel. Their art, their craftsmanship, was a silent, subtle act of defiance. Every time an artisan created something extraordinary, something beyond the functional, beyond the necessary, that was a rebellion. It wasn't about challenging the samurai. It wasn't about taking up arms. It was about saying, I'm more than what you think I am. I'm more than my place in this system. In a society where every person is just a cog in the machine, where no one is allowed to have dreams of their own, the act of creating something for the pure joy of it, for the beauty of it, was an act of resistance. Artisans didn't just make things to sell. They didn't just create tools or weapons or basic goods. They created works of beauty, of soul. And every time they did that, they were poking holes in the system. They were saying, I am not just a worker. I'm not just a tool for the samurai. I am something more. But even with this rebellion through art, it didn't change the fact that the artisans were still stuck. They were still at the mercy of the samurai, the lords, and the overall structure of feudal Japan. No matter how beautiful their work was, they still had to follow the rules. They still had to stay in their place. But their rebellion, their quiet defiance, lived on in the craft itself.
Now, let's shift gears and talk about the merchants. You think they're in a position of power, right? They've got money, they control trade, they've got all this wealth at their fingertips. But here's the thing. In feudal Japan, money doesn't buy you respect. The samurai look down on you. The lords see you as morally corrupt. Your wealth doesn't matter because you don't work the land and you don't fight in battle. You're just a parasite, they say. But guess what? The merchants were the ones who kept the wheels of the economy turning. Without them, there would be no goods to sell, no weapons to buy, no silk to wear. And while the samurai might have looked down on them, they still needed them. In a way, the merchants were quietly rebelling against the system by simply existing, by thriving where they were told they shouldn't. They were forcing the system to adapt. And sure, the samurai could look down on them all they wanted, but deep down, the samurai knew that without the merchants, their fancy armor and swords would be meaningless. The merchants had power in their own right. They were defying the system by making money in a way that wasn't honorable, but it still worked. The system needed them more than it wanted to admit. And then we have the women of feudal Japan. You might think that women, with all their restrictions, will be the last group capable of rebellion. But here's where things get really interesting. Despite being suppressed, despite being told to stay silent, despite being treated like property, women still found ways to assert their power. It wasn't always through overt rebellion. It wasn't always through breaking the rules. Sometimes it was just about survival. Sometimes it was about outliving the system. Some women, particularly those from the samurai class, would wield their own subtle power behind the scenes. They didn't need to raise armies. They didn't need to fight in battles. They had something just as powerful, influence. These women knew how to manipulate the system to their advantage. They knew how to navigate the rules, how to play the game, and how to make sure their voices were heard, even if they weren't allowed to speak openly. And in that way, even though the system tried to silence them, women still found ways to shape the narrative. And let's not forget the women who worked in the shadows. The geishas, the courtesans, the entertainers. Women who made their own living. Women who were seen as objects but who used their charm, wit, and beauty to gain influence in a world that sought to control them. Were they breaking the system? No. But were they pushing the boundaries? Absolutely. So, here's the thing. Even in the most oppressive systems, even in the darkest corners of society, there are always cracks. There are always people who find a way to survive, to rebel, to push back, in ways that don't necessarily involve violence or overthrow. These rebellions are subtle, quiet, often unnoticed. But they still change the game. And maybe that's the lesson we can learn from feudal Japan. No matter how tight the system, no matter how much control it tries to exert, the human spirit will always find a way to fight back. By now, you've seen the harsh, unyielding reality of feudal Japan, a world where everyone's life is decided by their social class, where honor is everything, and where even the smallest mistake can lead to death. It's a world built on pressure, on survival, and on the constant battle to uphold a system that doesn't leave room for anything less than perfection. But here's the thing. Despite all the darkness, despite all the pain, there's something undeniably fascinating about it all. Something that pulls you in and makes you wonder, how do they live this way? Let's break it down. We've seen the way the samurai live, how they follow Bushido, a code that demands absolute discipline and honor. The pressure they're under is beyond anything most of us could imagine. Every action, every word, every gesture is weighed against a code that leaves no room for mistakes. If they fail, it's not just a personal failure. It's a failure that dishonors their family, their ancestors, and their entire way of life. They're trapped by their own code. Their entire existence is defined by an external force, a set of rules that dictates how they live, how they die, and what happens to their legacy. And when you live like that, where one small mistake can destroy everything you worked for, you're not living freely. You're just surviving, just getting by in a world that doesn't allow for anything less than perfection. Then there's the peasants, the ones who work the land day in and day out, with nothing to show for it but the promise of survival. They're the backbone of society, the ones who provide the food, the labor, the sweat that keeps the system running. But they're also the ones who suffer the most. Their lives are defined by the seasons, by the whims of their lord, and by the weight of taxes that never seem to stop. They don't get the luxury of dreaming. They don't get the luxury of choice. They're stuck, trapped in a cycle of survival with no way out. And yet, despite all this hardship, they continue. They keep working. They keep going day after day because that's all they can do. They endure. And then you've got the merchants. They may not be as oppressed as the peasants, but they're still trapped in their own way. They've got money, sure, but they don't have respect. The samurai look down on them. The lords see them as a necessary evil. The merchants are the ones who keep the wheels of the economy turning, but they're not the ones who get to enjoy the benefits of that economy. They're the ones who make the goods, who move the goods, who sell the goods, but they don't get to enjoy the honor that the samurai do. They don't get to sit at the table with the lords. They're the forgotten middlemen, doing all the work but getting none of the glory. And then, of course, there are the women, the ones who live in the shadows, whose voices are silenced, whose roles are predefined before they even understand what life is about. Whether you're a samurai's wife or a peasant's daughter, your life is not your own. Your worth is determined by your ability to serve, to support, and to obey. You don't get to make your own decisions. You don't get to follow your dreams. Your life is defined by the men around you, by the family you're born into, and by the expectations placed on you by society. And the worst part? If you step out of line, if you speak out, if you try to be anything other than what you're expected to be, you're punished. You're erased. You're nothing. It's a system that completely ignores your humanity, your desires, your very existence, and treats you as if you're just a tool, an instrument in the larger game of survival. But even in that oppressive system, women found ways to assert their influence, to shape the world around them, even if only in small ways. It's not much, but it's something. The system as a whole is a masterclass in control. It's designed to keep everyone in line, to maintain the status quo, to ensure that things never change. It's a machine that runs on fear, on tradition, and on the constant need to uphold a set of rules that seem almost impossible to live by. The samurai are the enforcers of the system, the ones who keep the peasants in line, the ones who make sure that the merchants stay in their place, and the ones who protect the lords who rule over it all. The lords, meanwhile, sit atop this pyramid of control, pulling the strings and reaping the benefits of everyone else's hard work. But here's the thing. The system only works because everyone plays their part. The samurai need the peasants. The peasants need the merchants. The merchants need the samurai. And the lords? They need them all. But this system, as tight as it is, as unyielding as it seems, is also fragile. Because the moment someone breaks the rules, the whole thing starts to fall apart. The pressure of living within such a strict hierarchy can break people. It can crush their spirit. It can destroy them from the inside out. And when that happens, when someone finally pushes back, the system doesn't just shake. It shatters. It falls apart, piece by piece. And maybe that's the most tragic thing of all. The system works because no one dares to challenge it. But the moment someone does, the moment they stand up and say, "I won't be controlled anymore," the entire structure crumbles. And in the wake of that collapse, there's nothing left, just the ruins of a system that didn't allow anyone to truly live. And that's the paradox of feudal Japan. It's a system that works because everyone is trapped in it. Everyone is forced to play their role. Everyone is forced to survive. But no one, not really, is living. They're all just following the rules, waiting for the next day to come, hoping they don't slip up, hoping they don't make a mistake that ends it all. It's a world built on fear, built on control, built on a system that doesn't allow for freedom, for choice, or for dreams. It's a world where honor is everything, and yet it's a world where no one can ever truly be free. Now, we've talked about the pressure, the rules, the fear that runs through every level of feudal Japanese society. But let's flip the coin for a moment and look at the culture itself. Despite all the suffering, all the restriction and the control, there's a reason why feudal Japan is still so fascinating. It's a society built on respect, on duty, on honor. And for all its faults, for all its brutal expectations, there's a certain beauty to the way it functions. It's a culture that values discipline, tradition, and above all else, the idea that every action matters. There's no room for mistakes in this world, but there's also no room for indecision. The samurai live by a strict code that dictates their every move, their every word, and their every thought. And while that might sound like a nightmare to us, there's something admirable about it. There's something pure in the way they dedicate themselves to honor. Feudal Japan wasn't just about survival. It was about living with purpose. Every person in the system, whether they were a peasant, a merchant, a samurai, or a woman, had a role to play. And it wasn't just about doing that role. It was about doing it with integrity. The idea of integrity, of doing what's right, even when no one is looking, is woven into the very fabric of feudal society. It's what makes the samurai so compelling. Their life isn't just about fighting. It's about living by a code. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it might cost you everything. That's what Bushido is all about, the warrior's way. And yes, it's extreme. Yes, it's brutal. But in a way, it's a form of purity. It's a life lived by a set of principles that never change. There's no second-guessing, no room for error. You know your place, you know your role, and you live by it until the end. And the way that's reflected in everyday life is astounding. The rituals, the customs, the traditions that govern everything from how you bow to how you eat. It's all about creating a sense of order, of structure, of discipline. There's no chaos in feudal Japan. Everything has its place. Everything has its time. And for the samurai, that means control. Control over their actions, their words, and even their emotions. They can't show weakness. They can't show fear. They can't show joy. Everything they do is about maintaining the ideal image of the perfect warrior. And if they fail, if they slip up, well, there's only one way out. Honor is everything. And if you lose that, you lose yourself. You might as well be dead. But let's not forget about the peasants. We've been talking a lot about the samurai, but in some ways, the peasants are the unsung heroes of feudal Japan. They are the ones who work the land. They are the ones who provide the sustenance that everyone else needs to survive. Without them, the whole system would collapse. And yet, they get no respect. They get no recognition. They are, quite literally, the foundation of society, and yet they are seen as nothing more than tools to be used. It's a sad truth, but it's also the reality they live in. The peasants don't get to complain. They don't get to dream. They don't get to rise above. Their role is set in stone, and they know that from the moment they're born. The cycle of hard work, of sweat, of struggle, it's all they know. And while they don't have the glory of the samurai or the wealth of the merchants, they are, in many ways, the backbone of the entire system. And that's where the tragedy lies. The people who do the hardest work, the ones who keep everything running, are the ones who are least appreciated. They're the ones who get the smallest reward for their efforts. They're the ones who never get the honor, the respect, or the recognition they deserve. But here's the twist. Despite the harshness of their lives, despite the constant struggle, there's a strange kind of pride in the way they live. There's pride in doing your job well, in fulfilling your role, in contributing to the greater whole. It might not be glamorous. It might not be noble, but it's necessary. And that sense of necessity, that sense of duty, is what holds feudal Japan together. Let's talk about the merchants now. The ones with money. The ones who keep the economy running. The ones who create the trade routes and bring goods from one end of the country to the other. You'd think they'd be in a better position, right? They've got wealth. They've got resources. But guess what? They don't have respect. In feudal Japan, money doesn't buy you honor. Money doesn't buy you glory. Money doesn't even get you a seat at the table. The samurai may need the merchants to survive, but they certainly don't respect them. The merchants are seen as parasitic, as leeches feeding off the hard work of others. And yet, without them, the entire system would collapse. The samurai wouldn't get their weapons. The lords wouldn't get their silk. The peasants wouldn't get their supplies. The merchants are the invisible force that holds everything together. but they're also the most scorned group in society. It's a thankless job, but it's a job that keeps the system running. But what about the women? The women, as we've seen, are the most oppressed group in feudal Japan. They have no voice, no power, no agency. Their worth is measured by their ability to serve their family, their husband, and their lord. They don't get to dream. They don't get to decide their future. They're bound by rules that were made long before they were born, rules that demand their silence, their obedience, and their submission. But even in the face of this oppression, even in the face of their invisibility, women still find ways to assert their influence. They may not have the power to change the world, but they can shape the world around them. They can shape their family's future, their children's lives, and sometimes they can bend the system to their will. Now, let's pause for a second and talk about something even deeper. It's easy to get caught up in the harsh realities of feudal Japan, the rigid class system, the suffocating honor codes, the unyielding expectations that weigh everyone down. But let's take a step back and look at why this system worked for so long. Why didn't the peasants revolt? Why didn't the merchants rise up and demand more respect? Why didn't the samurai, with all their skill and power, ever challenge a system they were so bound by? The truth is, feudal Japan wasn't just a society. It was a culture, and culture as a way of embedding itself so deeply into the fabric of life that it becomes invisible. It's not just about following the rules. It's about believing in those rules, internalizing them so much that they become part of who you are. From a young age, you're taught that your role is your identity. If you're a peasant, you're taught that your life's purpose is to work the land. If you're a samurai, you're taught that your life's purpose is to serve your lord with unwavering honor. If you're a merchant, you're taught that your life's purpose is to make money, but never too much money, because that would put you out of place. This kind of culture doesn't just enforce conformity. It rewards it. You're not just following the rules because you're afraid of punishment. You're following them because you believe that what you're doing is right. You believe that it's your duty. And that's the trick. When a society can convince its people that their suffering is for a greater purpose, that the roles they play are necessary, it can survive. And it does survive generation after generation. Even as the cracks in the system start to show, even as the weight of the expectations crushes those beneath it. Now, let's get real for a moment. Feudal Japan was built on sacrifice. Every class sacrificed their own happiness, their own desires, and their own future for the sake of the system. The samurai sacrificed their freedom to live by Bushido. The peasants sacrificed their bodies, their health, and sometimes their very lives just to survive. The merchants sacrificed their dignity and respect, constantly forced to work behind the scenes without ever getting credit. And the women? They sacrificed their entire identities, their voices, and their dreams just to fulfill the role society assigned to them. The sad reality? The system only works if everyone is willing to make those sacrifices. If the peasants stop working, if the samurai stop following Bushido, if the merchants stop selling their goods, the system would collapse. The whole thing relies on everyone being willing to give up their own desires for the greater good. And while that might sound noble, it's also the thing that makes the system so oppressive. It's not just about survival. It's about a willingness to sacrifice everything for a system that doesn't care about you as an individual. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your future. It only cares about keeping the system running. But you know what's ironic? The system that demands all these sacrifices from everyone is also the system that kills people in the end. It doesn't just take your dreams. It takes your life. Because in feudal Japan, if you fall out of line, if you fail to live up to the system's expectations, you're erased. You're discarded. You're forgotten. It's as though you never existed in the first place. That's the price you pay for living in a society where nothing is about you. It's about your duty to the system, to the land, to your ancestors. It's about your role. And when you fail at your role, you don't just fail yourself, you fail everyone. And for all the beauty of the tradition, for all the honor that's supposed to come with being a samurai, or the satisfaction that should come with being a hard-working peasant, there's a tragic irony that runs through the whole thing. Everyone, no matter their class, is a prisoner of their own role. They're not free to live their lives. They're not free to express their individuality. They're locked into a system that's designed to keep them in place. And if they try to break free, well, that's when the system shows its teeth. Take the samurai. They live their lives constantly terrified that one wrong move will destroy everything they've worked for. One moment of weakness, one lapse in discipline, and they'll lose everything. They'll be stripped of their honor. They'll be thrown away. And the worst part? If they fail, they can't even die on their own terms. They have to end in the most dramatic, painful way imaginable, with seppuku, a ritual suicide that's not just about ending their life, but about atoning for the shame. And while it might seem like the ultimate act of control, it's also the ultimate loss. Because in the end, the samurai's life is not their own. It's the system's life. They live for their lord, for their ancestors, for the ideal Bushido. But they don't live for themselves. Then you've got the peasants. They work the land, day in and day out, never questioning, never stopping. Because if they do, the whole system falls apart. They give up their entire lives for rice and survival, but they're never truly free. They can't change their lot in life. They can't move up. They're stuck. Their whole existence is about making sure the samurai eat, making sure the lords stay in power. And even if they manage to survive, even if they do everything right, they're still at the mercy of the system. They have no control over their own destiny. It's all about endurance. And the merchants? They may have the money, but it's still not enough. They're still looked down upon by the samurai, still considered unworthy of respect, still stuck in a system where wealth doesn't buy you honor. And no matter how much they make, no matter how much they contribute to the economy, they'll always be second-class citizens. They're the invisible backbone of the system, but no one cares. They're necessary, but they're never important. Now, let's talk about the real kicker here. After everything we've seen, the sacrifices, the suffering, the rigid roles that define every single person's life in feudal Japan, there's one final truth we need to face. This system, despite all its strength and discipline, wasn't built to last. Oh, sure, it survived for centuries, and it looked invincible from the outside. The samurai with their swords, the peasants working the fields, the merchants wheeling and dealing, it all seemed to hold together, perfectly synchronized. But beneath that shiny exterior, the cracks were starting to show. Because no matter how tightly you try to control people, no matter how perfectly you try to force them into boxes, the human spirit can't be contained forever. You see, as much as feudal Japan tried to teach people that their lives didn't matter individually, that their roles were more important than their dreams, something deep down always resisted that. It's the same thing that makes a peasant dream of freedom, even as they work themselves to the bone. It's the same thing that makes a samurai question the honor they're asked to uphold, even as they follow Bushido to the letter. It's that little voice inside, the one that says, what if? What if there was more to life than just survival? What if there was something beyond the expectations, beyond the rules? What if I could change my future, my legacy? And here's the thing that really breaks it down. The people who lived under feudal Japan weren't robots. They weren't machines that could simply follow orders. They were people full of dreams, full of desires, full of hopes. And no matter how oppressive the system was, no matter how much they were taught to suppress those feelings, those desires, the human spirit found a way to push back. Even the smallest act of rebellion, whether it was a merchant amassing wealth against all odds, a woman stepping out of her prescribed role, or an artisan creating something that transcended mere function. It was a form of resistance, a quiet, invisible rebellion that no one could control. Take, for instance, the stories that still survive today, despite the rigidity of the system. Despite the suffering, there are countless tales of samurai who abandoned the life of honor to live for themselves. And the peasants? They may have never had the power to overthrow the system, but their hearts longed for something better. Even in their darkest moments, they dreamed of a world where they weren't bound to the land, where they didn't have to give up everything for survival. And then there were the merchants, the ones who weren't bound by the rules of the samurai or the expectations of the peasants. They were the ones who quietly accumulated power, quietly built empires. They understood that while they weren't part of the noble class, their wealth and the freedom that came with it was a form of rebellion. They played by their own rules, built their own systems, and in doing so, they slipped through the cracks of feudal society. making something for themselves in a world that would have preferred to see them stay invisible. But what about the women? The ones who were forced to live in the shadows, who were taught that their lives were nothing more than a support role. Well, the truth is, women in feudal Japan found a way to be heard, even if it was quiet, even if it was behind the scenes. Women wielded power in subtle ways, from influencing the decisions of their husbands and fathers, to finding their own voice in a system that tried to silence them. And while they were never going to be able to completely rewrite the rules, they still managed to carve out small spaces for themselves where they could live outside the constraints of their roles. So here's the thing. Feudal Japan, for all its order, its honor, its tradition, it was always on the edge of breaking. It had a balance, yes, but it wasn't a balance built on equality or freedom. It was built on fear, on control, and on sacrifice. And when you build a society on those things, there's always a breaking point. And that breaking point, it came. As history moved on, so too did the system. Change came in waves, often violently. And when the dust settled, the old ways couldn't hold up anymore. The samurai, once the pinnacle of honor and power, found themselves irrelevant in a world that was changing faster than they could keep up. The peasants, who had long been the backbone of society, started to realize they didn't have to just survive. They started to dream of something more. The merchants, well, they eventually rose to the top of the heap in ways they never could have imagined under the old system. And the women, while they still face an uphill battle, their voices, even if soft and quiet, began to make ripples in the world that would eventually lead to change. Feudal Japan's system, as brutal as it was never meant to last forever. It was a system built on survival, on order, and on control. But what it couldn't control, what it couldn't contain, was a human desire for something more. And that desire, it's what eventually toppled the system. Because no matter how hard you try to keep people in their place, no matter how much pressure you put on them, they'll always push back. They'll always yearn for more. And that, in the end, is what made feudal Japan a world full of contradictions. A world where discipline and control existed side by side with dreams, rebellions, and a relentless human drive for something greater. And so, after all the struggle, all the sacrifices, and the endless battle between tradition and change, the story of feudal Japan eventually gave way to something new. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This shift didn't come easily, nor did it happen overnight. It took centuries of cultural evolution, political strife, and, yes, rebellion. But what's incredible about the fall of feudal Japan is not just how the system collapsed, but how it transformed, how elements of the old world were carried into the new, adapted, and reshaped into something that could survive in a rapidly changing world. And let's talk about why that change happened in the first place. After all, Japan's feudal system was strong. It had its flaws, of course, but it was stable until it wasn't. The samurai, the lords, the peasants, they all had their roles. They knew their place. But the thing is, roles change. As the world evolved, as new ideas spread across the globe, feudal Japan was forced to reckon with its own antiquated system. The samurai, once the heart and soul of the nation, found their relevance diminishing. Their code of honor, so carefully constructed and fiercely upheld, began to feel outdated in a world that demanded new ways of thinking. The moment of true reckoning came in the late 1800s, when Japan found itself at a crossroads. The country was isolated, cut off from the rest of the world by the Tokugawa shogunate. And while this isolation helped preserve the old ways, it also limited Japan's growth. As Western powers began to expand and industrialize, Japan could either stay locked in its feudal past or modernize, and risk losing its traditional identity. This choice was the beginning of the end for the feudal system. When the U.S. Navy arrived in 1853, led by Commodore Matthew Perry, it forced Japan out of its isolation. This marked the beginning of Japan's modernization, kicking off the Meiji Restoration. Suddenly, everything Japan knew, its honor codes, its way of life, its class structure, was thrown into chaos. And this wasn't a peaceful transition. The samurai, who had long upheld the structure of feudal Japan, found themselves at odds with the forces of change. The samurai, who had once been the embodiment of honor and power, now became a symbol of a time that no longer fit in the modern world. But here's the crazy part. Even as the samurai lost their power, even as the feudal system crumbled and the country embraced a new era, the values that the samurai upheld, the ideas of duty, of loyalty, of respect, didn't just vanish. They didn't disappear with the fall of the shogunate. Instead, those values morphed. They evolved. They were woven into the fabric of Japan's new, modern society. The idea of honor didn't die. It just adapted to new circumstances. The honor code that had once defined the samurai now found its place in Japan's military, in the workplace, and the way Japanese people interacted with each other. But let's not romanticize it, either. The transition wasn't without its own harsh consequences. The samurai, once so revered, found themselves pushed to the margins. Their swords were taken away, their privileges stripped. Many of them, unable to adapt to the changing world, turned to rebellion, desperate to hold on to a system that was no longer relevant. It's a stark reminder that progress is often painful, and that even the most respected institutions can become obsolete. And then there's the peasant class, which, under feudalism, had been the foundation of the whole system. The ones who fed the samurai, who worked tirelessly in the fields. They were always at the bottom, always in service. But with the collapse of feudalism, they too saw their position evolve. They weren't just nameless, faceless laborers anymore. They became part of Japan's growing workforce, the ones who would fuel Japan's industrial revolution. They no longer had to live in constant fear of their lord's wrath. They could own property. They could participate in the economy in ways they never could before. The merchants? Well, they finally got the respect they'd always craved. With Japan's growing industrial power, the merchant class rose to prominence, becoming the driving force behind Japan's new economic future. The once scorned middle class now had the wealth, the influence, and the respect they had long been denied. But what about the women? While they still had a long way to go, the collapse of the feudal system opened up new opportunities for them. With the rise of industrialization and modernization, women found new roles in society. They began to work outside the home. They started to gain access to education. The suffocating grip of traditional expectations started to loosen, even if only slightly. Feudal Japan had confined women to the shadows. But in the new world, they began to find their voices, to step out of the roles they'd been assigned. Slowly, very slowly, change began to creep in. The truth is, the fall of feudal Japan didn't just mean the end of an era. It meant the transformation of a society. The values, the customs, the beliefs that had once defined Japan were absorbed, adapted, and reshaped to fit a new world. The samurai may have lost their power, but their principles lived on. The peasants may have been given new opportunities, but their hard-working spirit remained. The merchants, once looked down upon, became the backbone of a new economy. And the women, who had been silenced for so long, found their voices in a new society that slowly began to recognize their worth. Now, let's zoom out and really take in the full picture of feudal Japan. It was a system that seemed almost indestructible. From the outside, it was like a perfectly structured machine where every cog, every person had their place. The samurai, with their strict code of Bushido, stood at the top, warriors bound by honor, ready to protect and serve their lord. Below them, the peasants toiled in the fields, working tirelessly to provide for everyone else, bound by duty and fear. And the merchants? The unseen force that kept the economy moving, quietly building wealth while everyone else looked down on them. The women? Well, they were just expected to stay in the background, to be silent, to support everyone else, their voices smothered by society's expectations. But despite the power and structure that feudal Japan represented, the cracks were always there. The human spirit, with its drive for freedom, for autonomy, for something greater, can only be suppressed for so long. The samurai, bound by their rigid code, eventually began to question the very system they'd spent their lives upholding. The peasants, tired of the endless cycle of work and subjugation, began to dream of a life outside the fields. The merchants, once scorned, found ways to maneuver through the system and quietly build empires of their own. And the women, invisible in a society that told them their place, slowly found their voice. It's like the old world was built on a ticking clock, a clock that was always counting down to the moment when it would all come crashing down. And when the system finally crumbled under the weight of its own contradictions, it didn't disappear. It transformed. The values, the traditions, the lessons learned in feudal Japan didn't vanish with the fall of the samurai. Instead, they evolved. They were woven into the fabric of a new, more modern Japan, one that was embracing the future while still holding on to the past. The samurai, once the epitome of honor and discipline, found their power replaced by a growing military and political system that would lead Japan into a new era of imperialism and industrialization. Their honor code, Bushido, lived on, not in the swords and armor of the samurai, but in the hearts of those who carried their ideals into the world of modern warfare, politics, and even business. The peasants, once bound by the land, found new opportunities in the rapidly growing cities. The merchant class, long disregarded, became the driving force behind Japan's economic boom. And the women, they started to reclaim their place in society, though the struggle was long and ongoing. But the real beauty of it all is that despite the harsh realities of feudal Japan, despite the bloodshed, the suffering, the suppression, there was always this undercurrent of resilience. Even when the system tried to crush the human spirit, even when it seemed like the world was designed to keep everyone in their place, there were moments of rebellion, moments of defiance. And those moments, small as they might have been, were what kept Japan's heart beating. Feudal Japan might be gone, but the lessons it taught about honor, duty, survival, and rebellion still echo through time. And what's incredible is that even though this world no longer exists in the form it once did, parts of it still live on in modern Japan. The reverence for tradition, the respect for duty, the unspoken understanding that what you do matters. These values aren't gone. They've just changed. They've adapted. They've evolved into something that can survive in a world that's very different from the one the samurai and peasants knew. And that's the lasting impact of feudal Japan.
Not just the samurai or the warriors or the peasants who worked the land, but the culture itself, a culture that was built on ideals of honor, duty, and sacrifice. A culture that showed how fragile a system can be when it's built on the backs of those who have no power. A culture that ultimately proved that no matter how tightly you try to control people, no matter how much you suppress them, their spirit, their will to live, to be free, to change, will always find a way to break through. And when that happens, the system crumbles. But what rises from the ashes is something more powerful, something more enduring. Feudal Japan may have been a world of rigid rules and unyielding expectations, but at its core it was a world that taught us something vital, that the human spirit, no matter how controlled, will always yearn for something more. And in the end it will always find a way to break free.